Originally, the word taboo referred to a place where people were forbidden to enter, a place above the laws of man, with ignorance being no protection from punishment, a place which is off limits. Every age and every community has its own taboos. Sometimes they protect the sites where gods, spirits, or ancestors reside, and sometimes mysterious treasures. The consequences of breaking a taboo can be devastating. An incredible breach of a taboo is said to have taken place 150 years ago in the small town of Axum in northern Ethiopia. Two Armenian monks, Timotheus and Isaac, were on a mission on behalf of the British Crown. They were to inspect no less a treasure than the Ark of the Covenant, the most important shrine in Judaism. Containing the tablets on which the Ten Commandments are written, the Ark was thought to have been lost. Amazingly, the unexpected happened. The Ethiopian prince broke the taboo and allowed the two monks to cast their eyes on the forbidden shrine. What exactly did they hope to discover?
And Moses, going up into the mountain, he fasted for 40 days and nights, and he spoke with God, and he received it with great glory. And all this contributes to its importance in the worship of God.
Inscribed on two tablets, the Ten Commandments constitute the law by which Jews, Christians, and Muslims are supposed to lead their lives even today. God instructed Moses to build a repository for the tablets. It was known as Aron Habrit, which means chest or closet. The Ark of the Covenant still stirs the imagination of treasure hunters even today, but we can only guess at what it looked like. It was not as richly ornamented as the Hollywood movie about it indicates. The Old Testament describes God's instructions regarding its construction with astonishing precision. It had to be made of acacia wood, covered entirely with gold. The lid had to consist of pure gold and be adorned with two cherubim. A single moulding of gold had to be put around it with 4 rings of gold attached to the 4 corners. Through these rings, staves of shittim wood overlaid with gold for carrying the ark were to be inserted. The appearance of the cherubim remains a mystery. Around the time the Ark of the Covenant was created, the Assyrians used the word kirubu to describe a human-beast hybrid. The figures could also have been inspired by Egyptian tutelary goddesses like Isis or Selket. In the Old Testament, cherubim are described as the messengers of God. They can resemble a human being, but also a fantasy creature. But why were the two Armenian monks looking for Judaism's most sacred shrine in Ethiopia of all places? According to biblical tradition, the Ark of the Covenant was created on Sinai 3,000 years ago as a transportable shrine for the Ten Commandments. After Moses had freed the people of Israel from captivity in Egypt, the laws were to govern their future coexistence.
The Ark of the Covenant was not given in a displayed form to Moses. It was given with covered with clouds and fire. And even in the Old Testament worship, only one person was allowed to see it and to pray in front of it and to touch it and to make sacrifice upon it. The high priest, the archpriest of the Jewish community.
Just nice and slow, please. Nice, slow and straight.
The fact that observance of this taboo could be enforced directly by God is shown by a passage in the Old Testament. A man named Uzzah was commissioned to transport the Ark of the Covenant. After King David had conquered Jerusalem and established the capital of his kingdom there, he also wanted the city to become a religious center. So David ordered Uzzah's father, who had been the Ark's guardian for 20 years, to send the shrine to Jerusalem. An accident had fatal consequences for Uzzah, who was responsible for the transport. When the cart carrying it tilted and the shrine threatened to slide off, Uzzah tried to secure it, but in doing so, he broke the taboo. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Uzzah, and he struck him down because he put out his hand to the ark.
Ein Berührungstabu schafft Aufmerksamkeit.
A touch taboo creates awareness and demonstrates power.
Egal welche Absicht ein Mensch hat,
Irrespective of someone's intentions, if I really want to show that the taboo is very important, then punishment for breaking it must be immediate. It is a great help in passing on this taboo from generation to generation if people are told repeatedly that even if they do something with the best of intentions, they are still breaking a taboo.
Das ist nun wirklich ein Tabu.
In 586 BC, the history of the Ark of the Covenant actually comes to an end. 500 years after David had the shrine brought to his city, Jerusalem, together with the temple David's successors had built for preserving the Ark, was destroyed by the Babylonians under King Nebuchadnezzar. So, was the Ark destroyed in the Sea of Flames? That is not what they believe in the Ethiopian capital Addis Ababa. Instead, the view maintained by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church is that when Jerusalem was razed to the ground, the Ark of the Covenant was no longer kept in the temple in Jerusalem, but was safe in Ethiopia.
We have it in our country. We brought the Ark of the Covenant from Jerusalem to Ethiopia. And this story is kept in Ethiopia for 3,000 years, for a very long time, continuously in our history.
That is what is written in an ancient chronicle called the Kebra Nagast. The National Archives in Addis Ababa contain a microfiche copy of a late translation of the manuscript. It is all that remains of the tale of how the Israelite king Solomon sired a child with the Queen of Sheba. The Kebra Nagast describes the mysterious queen as the ruler of Ethiopia. Her son, Menelik, grew up in Ethiopia, but as a young man, he visited King Solomon in Jerusalem, where the monarch lavished gifts upon him. On his way back, however, Menelik noticed that his companions had done something unbelievable. Following the will of God, it seems, they had stolen the Ark of the Covenant from the Temple of Jerusalem and replaced it with a copy.
If a touch taboo exists for the Ark of the Covenant, but it is taken to another place, in other words, has to be touched in some way, a different story is needed. There are stories which serve to uphold the taboo by telling of fatalities. But what is then needed is a tale indicating that God's will was involved. Otherwise, the entire concept of a taboo would collapse.
So exactly what kind of a country was the Ark taken to? Ethiopia is the source of the Blue Nile, the lifeline of the advanced civilizations in Sudan and Egypt. But here, its waters are still too swift to give the country the rich harvests its big neighbors enjoy. It was not until the Christian Middle Ages that Ethiopia's most important architectural masterpiece was built. In Lalibela, the ruler of the same name had 11 mainly multi-storied stone churches carved from a single piece of rock. The site, created on behalf of God as a new Jerusalem, is still a place of pilgrimage today. Even now, every church in Ethiopia contains tabots, as they are known, consecrated altar slabs made of wood or stone, which represent the Ark of the Covenant in every church. When processions are held, at the Timkat festival in Gondar, for example, tabots are covered and carried through the ranks of the faithful. The Timkat festival recalls the baptism of Christ. Hundreds of young men jump into the Fasilides bath to commemorate the event. Here, Jewish and Christian symbolism interface.
So we consider our country as a Judeo-Christian country, accepting Old Testament before and the New Testament after. And this connection happened in Axum, in that place where the Ark was first arrived. And it is also the same place where the first church was built, in maybe, without exaggerating it, in sub-Saharan Africa.
Tradition has it that the Ark of the Covenant is stored in Axum even today. The city is a magnet for Christian pilgrims who come in their hundreds of thousands every year, especially in November, to celebrate Haida Zion, the festival of the Virgin Mary. They all hope to see the Ark of the Covenant and be particularly close to God. However, none of the faithful will ever set eyes on it. The Ark is said to be kept in this little chapel, and even if the Patriarch himself is present, it is not removed from its hiding place.
Theologically, we connect the Holy Virgin Mary with the Ark of the Covenant, like the Ark was the Old Covenant, where Israel and God made a covenant between them, that the people of Israel will be the people of God and God will be the God of Israel. But in the New Testament, we have a new covenant through the birth of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So his mother, as a representation of the Ark, where he took the flesh and the soul from her, and he became the new covenant.
It's a bold theological concept, one which turns the central Jewish shrine into a powerful Christian symbol. But even today, many pilgrims simply feel drawn by the archaic magic of the Ark of the Covenant and come in vast numbers. The Ark is protected by a monk who must never leave the grounds of the chapel. The office of sentinel is held by Abba Tesfa Mariam. The chapel belongs to the bigger church of Our Lady Mary of Zion. The chapel is taboo. No one apart from the monk is allowed to enter the small building. The faithful have to pray next to one another in the open air or in the adjacent church.
It's not a culturally orientated taboos. These are religiously formulated canons, which we have to obey without any question, because that is a rule given to us, not a convention that we agree upon.
We need to open this.
No.
We need to see it.
No.
It is said that the Ark has only been opened once in Ethiopia's history.
People don't need to know. It's holy. It will remain sealed.
The Crown of Ethiopia commands you to open this immediately.
You will regret this.
Although the Bishop of Axum did everything in his power to thwart the plans of the two Armenian monks, Prince Kasai allowed Timotheus and Isaac to take a look at the Ark of the Covenant. But what did the prince expect to gain from breaching the taboo on the Ark? Was he himself curious about a relic that was clouded in secrecy? Or did he expect the scholars to provide ultimate proof that the Ark of the Covenant really was in the possession of the Ethiopians? If that was his intention, however, his hopes were not fulfilled. Timotheus wrote later that
the chest itself was built in the Indian style. Inside there was a single, almost square slab twice the size of a human hand and as thick as a thumb. It was made of pink marble, of the kind found in Ethiopia. On the front, written in ancient Hebrew script but in a cursive Turkish style, were 5 commandments. Another 5 were written on the back. Apart from a single chip, the slab was unblemished and showed no traces of aging.
the monks were convinced that what they had seen was a 13th or 14th century copy and not the original from the temple in Jerusalem.
Well, I have read the same document of these Armenian testimonies, but I don't think they will be allowed to see the original Ark of the Covenant, which is kept in a very sacred place where only one person is guarding it. But they may be allowed to see the replicas, Ethiopian tradition of, different art, because if they are priestess.
This would seem to refute the statement by the only two people ever allowed to see the Ark of the Covenant in Axum, and keep alive the mystery of whether the shrine has been preserved and really is kept in Axum. For more than 100 years now, a vast treasure of a totally different kind has been keeping people away from an enormous area in Namibia. We're talking about diamonds. Today, the glittering stones mainly attract submarine treasure hunters wearing neoprene diving suits. More and more young adventurers are searching the bed of the Atlantic in the hope of getting rich quickly. And above all, they need to hurry because the wealth off the coast of Namibia was divided up a long time ago. Mining concessions are expensive and hard to come by. According to estimates by government officials and investors, around 300 tons of top-quality diamonds lie in the sea off the coast of Namibia. It's planned to mine the diamonds industrially on a huge scale. In future, fewer and fewer licenses will be issued for prospecting by hand. Nevertheless, the diamond rush is in full swing. The glittering stones from Namibia are regarded as particularly pure and are in great demand in the jewelry trade. A single star designer creation can weigh more than a kilogram and cost several $1 million. The restricted area on the Namibian coast has existed for more than 100 years. It was established to protect one of the biggest diamond deposits in the world. Extending from the Orange River in the south to Hottentots Bay in the north, the prohibited zone covers an area of 26,000 square kilometers. The history of diamond mining in Namibia began in the late 19th century, when the present-day country was a German colony. With the help of dubious treaties and military force, a German colony had become established in what was then known as German Southwest Africa. Even today, many buildings and various place and street names bear testimony to the German past, as in Luderitz, the biggest town in the region. The entire country is still characterized by the diamond rush, which completely changed Namibia more than 100 years ago. Michael Kraft is the grandson of the man who triggered it off. August Stauch was a railway employee in Thuringia who came to the German colony of Southwest Africa in 1907. Stauch suffered from asthma, and his doctor had recommended the dry climate there. The construction of a railway system also offered secure employment.
He was originally offered a job as a surveyor, but when he arrived, he found the post had already been taken. Basically, all that remained was track supervision, keeping the railway lines free of drifting sand. So that's what he did. He lived in a godforsaken place called Grasplatz. You had to find something to occupy your time there, otherwise you'd become an alcoholic. But my grandfather was a very outgoing person, so instead of feeling sorry for himself, he decided to make the best of things.
On April the 10th, 1908, something happened that was to upset Stauch's boring everyday life completely. One of his workers, a man called Zacharias Levela, was busy shoveling sand off the narrow gauge track when he suddenly noticed something.
My grandfather was interested in everything, especially geology and plants. He collected every kind of plant he came across, and he told his workers that if they saw anything interesting, they had to show him.
When he saw what Leveler had found, August Stauch was stunned. On the one hand, he had never heard of anywhere in the world where something valuable could simply be picked up off the ground. On the other hand, though, the stone was clearly a diamond. He hardly dared hope of finding more specimens.
Show me where you found this.
The geological situation is unique. The diamonds were formed not in Namibia, but 2,000 kilometers away in the Drakensberg Mountains of South Africa. Their history goes back more than 100 million years. It's only at a depth of 150 kilometers that the pressure and heat are sufficient to turn carbon into diamonds. After being formed so far underground, the precious stones were then transported to the surface by volcanic activity. The Orange River carried the diamonds as far as its mouth on the Atlantic. The constant northerly current then spread them along the Namibian coast. Finally, the stones on the beach were gathered up by the incessant wind and carried far into the interior.
Lots of people picked up these stones and then threw them away, thinking they were worthless. But my grandfather had the intelligence to give the matter more thought and draw the right conclusions.
Most of the diamonds were small, but there were lots of them, and they were scattered everywhere. Stauch already suspected that a new era had dawned for the region.
People like Stauch, when he was here at Grassplatz, he studied the environment and the geology and everything. And that's why he knew when he got the first diamond there, he knew it must have been coming from the south. That's why he picked off the claims in the right area.
Convinced by what he had found, Stauch borrowed money to buy horses and oxen and to obtain prospecting licenses from the colonial office. Well equipped, he embarked on an expedition to the coast. In Fairy Tale Valley, as it became known, he discovered even bigger deposits of diamonds.
He gave away some of the little diamonds. He told people what they were, but not everyone believed him. It was only after he found Fairy Tale Valley near Pomona, staked his claim and received confirmation from Berlin that everyone believed him, and the rush began.
By then, Stauch had already secured 75 square kilometers of exclusive prospecting land.
That is when the great rush began. Postman or butcher, baker or merchant, every man grabbed a pick and shovel and set out into the desert. But my grandfather had already staked a large area for himself.
More and more people were gripped by diamond fever. The first mines were established, and new towns and settlements were built in the desert in record time. The most famous of them, Kolmanskop, was once the richest city in southern Africa. Today, only ruins bear testimony to its past glory. William Thobson is committed to preserving the ghost towns in the restricted area.
Look, the feeling I get when I come here is I'm amazed. If I look at everything they achieved here in the middle of the desert in 1908. I mean, there was a casino here, they had a bowling alley, there was a seawater swimming pool. They had electricity in 1911, when Germany and a lot of European countries still had gas lamps. This hospital had the first X-ray machine in southern Africa. It could accommodate up to 250 people. So the heyday with the German people, when it was a typical German community, was from 1908 till 1940.
Not only were there an incredibly large number of diamonds in Fairy Tale Valley, they also lay around on the surface. The diamond seekers hung German bottling jars around their necks for collecting the precious stones they found. At first, all the work was done manually, but even without mechanical aids, the yields were overwhelming. In the first 2 years alone, diamond prospecting in German Southwest Africa produced 141,000 carats. At the time, this was 1/5 of the total world diamond production. In order to wrest its last diamonds from the desert, Stauch invested in washing plants like those used in gold prospecting. Constantly in search of new deposits, Stauch bought more land and employed more and more workers, mainly locals, to pan for diamonds. From time to time, even bigger diamonds were found, encouraging Stauch to keep expanding his enterprise. When news of the rich diamond finds reached Berlin, the previously rather unpopular colony suddenly aroused interest in Germany as well. Only 4 months after the first find, the entire Diamond Coast was declared a restricted area.
In the old days, in the South Africa era, when we were children, getting caught searching for diamonds in the restricted area was more of a crime than murder. No one was allowed in without a permit, but it was impossible to get one anyway. The vehicles that were used inside the restricted area weren't allowed to leave it. They had to be scrapped there. People who lived and worked in the restricted area had to pass through any number of X-ray checks to make sure they weren't smuggling any diamonds out. That was an absolute taboo. Nobody was allowed in.
Since 1994, 4 years after Namibia gained independence, operations in the restricted area have been controlled by Namdeb, a parastatal concern. In many places, mining diamonds is no longer worthwhile, and mines are being abandoned. Restrictions have already been eased, and parts of the prohibited area opened up for guided tours. For the German adventurers, after only a few years, the diamond rush was over. Their settlements experienced but a brief heyday. After the First World War broke out in July 1914, hostilities also reached German Southwest Africa. But here, the war was over for the Germans after just 12 months. Although they were allowed to retain their prospecting licenses, trading had become more difficult, and quite a number of prospectors abandoned their claims. Ultimately, the diamonds brought no luck to August Stauch either. During the world economic crisis, he too lost his entire fortune. He died in Germany in 1947, totally destitute.
He was born poor and he died poor, but in between he achieved a great deal.
Experts see the future of diamond mining primarily offshore. All along the coast of Namibia, special ships suck up the sandy seabed and wash out the precious stones fully automatically. The diamond fever triggered off by a German railway official more than 100 years ago is still present. A taboo of a totally different kind is in force on a tiny island in the Indian Ocean. Even today, no outsider is allowed to set foot on North Sentinel Island. The first person known to have broken this taboo was a young British civil servant called Maurice Vidal Portman. On behalf of the British Crown, he embarked on an expedition to explore the islands of the Sentinelese, a tribe regarded as dangerous. But two warriors from neighboring islands, whom Portman had taken along to make initial contact, refused to venture all too far into the interior of North Sentinel. The mysterious island which Portman visited over 100 years ago belongs to the Andaman Archipelago in the Gulf of Bengal. Today, the 204 islands in the archipelago are part of the Union Territory of India, but they lie much closer to the coast of Myanmar. Busy shipping routes have run right past the Andamans for centuries, but very few seafarers showed an interest in the islands themselves. It was through Marco Polo in the 13th century that the first descriptions of the islanders came to Europe. In his travel journal, he wrote, "All the people on these islands have heads like dogs. It's the same with their teeth and eyes. They are very cruel people and eat anyone they can capture." It wasn't until 1858, when they were officially made part of British India, that the Andamans were explored more closely. The islands were declared a penal colony and used primarily for the long-term detention of Indian resistance fighters. Naval officer Maurice Portman was stationed in the capital of the archipelago, Port Blair, but his duties had nothing to do with the Indian prisoners. He was responsible for establishing contact with the various island peoples and for their administration. At first, however, the inhabitants of North Sentinel could not be found. Portman spent over 20 years on the Andamans. During this time, he photographed and documented the indigenous peoples of the archipelago. At the start of the British colonial era, there were at least 3,000 Great Andamanese, Jarawa, Onge and Sentinelese on the islands. By the end of it, only a few hundred were left. When the Indian subcontinent gained independence from Britain in 1947 and was partitioned into India and Pakistan, the Andamans became part of the Union Territory of India. It was not until the 1960s that the Sentinelese, still an obscure people, aroused interest again.
When I was invited to go there, it was a great idea. So let us see unknown people, practically unknown.
An anthropologist, back then Professor Triloknath Pandey, was working for the Anthropological Survey of India. For the first time, the peoples of the remote archipelago were to be studied more closely, especially the Sentinelese, who led an isolated existence.
There was no intention to forcibly occupy it or to disturb the North Sentinelese in any way. It was just to know what is going on there, and if possible, to send out a message of friendship.
The concept for establishing contact was based on regular visits and gifts. Coconuts were deposited on the beach, along with practical things like pans, pots and knives. The researchers even left a suckling pig for the natives. But the scientists' hopes were not fulfilled. After a while, Sentinelese did appear on the beach, but the gifts were not accepted. Instead, many of the islanders were carrying weapons. They fired arrows as a warning and patently ridiculed the scientists with shouts and gestures. And that is how the situation remained for many years.
So the message most of the time was that we don't want you here. We don't want to be disturbed. We are not disturbing you, and you please leave us alone.
Some researchers believe that this negative attitude stems from the Portman expedition of 1890. Back then, as a confidence-building measure, the British would first capture several members of a foreign people, then treat them in a friendly manner and inundate them with gifts. On their release, it was hoped the captives would return to their villages and advocate peaceful cooperation with the outsiders. The only natives Portman and his crew found on Sentinel Island were an elderly couple and 4 children playing on the beach. On the other islands of the Andaman archipelago, such abductions occurred more often.
Andamanis were considered as objects. At the turn of the century, there were 600 or 700 Andamanis, 1901. And before that, I suppose there were 3,000 something.
Allegedly, the British wanted to bring civilization to the Andamans. Portman himself believed that his drawings and surveys would make a major contribution towards fostering understanding for the islanders. But through establishing contact, he brought many Andamanese nothing but suffering and death.
There's a very well-documented account of how Jarawa women and men were caught. I'm using the word caught because that's what the Britishers used, the word caught, just like animals, you see. And they realized that they come by certain river in the morning to drink water, and so to also to bathe and be in the and to catch river fish and so on and so forth. So they hired their people to catch them, and they are very good runners. The Jarawas are very good runners. So they used to run, but unfortunately women and pregnant women could not run very fast. So the Britishers caught them and put them behind the bars, thinking they'll learn their language. But they couldn't learn the language. On the contrary, the woman child fell sick and died.
The abduction of the group of Sentinelese ordered by Portman also proved a complete disaster. The elderly couple both contracted diseases brought in by the British and died within a week. Since they were not expected to have any major influence on their people, the children were sent straight back to North Sentinel Island. Some researchers believe the youngsters might also have become infected with European germs and thus, on returning home, caused an epidemic. It was not until the early 90s, a century after Portman, that direct peaceful contact with the Sentinelese was established. Decades of effort by the Pandit team finally bore fruit.
It had great psychological value and practical value. And for me, it was a matter of excitement and joy that we had achieved this kind of progress with them, where we were not expecting it to happen so easily and so soon, perhaps. I think it was in the background of 2 decades' work, 70s, 80s, starting with 67, must have at least at some point softened their attitude. They thought we were not such bad people after all.
But there might also be another reason. In the form of anthropologist Madhumala Chattopadhyay, for the first time, a contact mission had also involved a woman.
At that moment, I was very happy that first time they came and touched the boat and playful mood. They were not suspicious about us, our contact team, and they are really in playful mood, and that means not scared at that time. And when they were taking coconut, that means they are accepting our gift and friendship. So I was very happy.
At the time, the anthropologists regarded the encounter as a breakthrough, and hoped that they would at last be able to learn more about the mysterious Sentinelese islanders. But they were stopped by the Indian government, which changed its policy concerning indigenous peoples. Exclusion zones and reserves were set up to allow indigenous peoples to lead traditional lives in their ancestral territories. So far, that concept has worked well for the Sentinelese, but not for the Jarowa on the main island.
All passengers must have their passport and driving license handy at all times.
A trunk road for transporting goods runs right through the reserve created for the Jarowa. Today, the road is used primarily by streams of tourists who come to see the Stone Age people.
Do not give the Jarowa any biscuits, bananas, or articles of clothing. Violations of these rules may be sanctioned with fines or imprisonment.
And this road is cutting through the Jarowa territory. It was built illegally and used by the Indian Army and the local police for a photo safari tour. In fact, a human zoo occurs 4 times a day on that road. Like the army, the Indian Army, they bring Indian tourists, wealthy Indian tourists, who have paid for a tour along the road to take pictures of the Jarowas.
Taking photos of the Jarowa and interacting with them is actually forbidden. But for a small consideration, the police are prepared to turn a blind eye. For the tourists, the safari tours are an experience. For the Jarowa, they have dramatic consequences.
The Jarowa youth, boys especially, have started coming out on the Andaman Trunk Road, and they don't want to go hunting with their parents. So the children were not learning the art of hunting. And the parents complain, if they do not know the art of hunting, how would they survive? So they go and beg, what we call begging. But then they come outside and they ask people to feed them. And not only that, it is now percolated down to sex. So sexual assault or exploitation of women could be made for a bowl of rice.
Dance. You too. Come on. Dance. Dance for me.
So this is a whole vicious circle, you know. So bringing people into your stream much earlier than they are prepared for is always harmful.
Western television teams are refused permission to enter Jarowa territory. But French filmmaker Alexandre Derem visited the hunters nonetheless.
I learned that some Jarowa went out of their forests to complain about rape, kidnapping, and murder. And they were looking for help, but no one were listening to them. So with my crew, we decided to make it, to get inside the territory, to meet them, and ask them what kind of problem they face, and also what they want for the future. If they want to become Indian, or if they want to stay as they are.
Like the Sentinelese, the Jarowa also try to live in a totally traditional way. Each person does what he can do best. There is no chief or any religious leader. Food is distributed first to the immediate family. Anything left over is shared with everyone. Children grow up together and are looked after by all the adults. Handicraft skills are not taught. Children learn by watching. There is still room for people to live in this way, but civilization is encroaching from all sides.
Unfortunately, we have nothing good to offer them. Because the Jarowa will not enjoy the best of our civilization. Compared to us, the Jarowa are poor. They have no citizenship. They have no right. So in India, they are called Adivasis, outcast people. And most of the outcast people end up in slums. They live in dirt, and they live poorly. They get disease. So there is nothing good coming from our world.
The Jarowa also have to learn that not everyone who comes to their homeland is only interested in taking pictures.
Poachers invade our territory. They come to our coasts from far away. They set traps for wild pigs. They kill all the wild pigs. Wild pigs have become rare.
Hunting is getting more and more difficult because the Jarowa's habitat is being reduced to smaller and smaller areas that are not given sufficient protection. The Jarowa are thus forced to keep turning to other quarry. But there's not always enough game available all year round, so the hunter's livelihood is gradually being taken from them.
The goal of the government is to starve them and make them leave their territory, so they will leave this beautiful white sand beach for tourists and some tourists from hotels and stuff like that.
Up to now, only the Sentinelese have been able to defend their territory successfully. The other indigenous peoples of the Andamans, the Onge and the Great Andamanese, and the Jarowa have either lost large parts of their land, been killed, or forcibly resettled. The fact that the Jarowa are responding violently to the increasing number of attacks illustrates the need for the reserves assigned to them to be protected far more effectively in order to avoid further confrontations.
Some poachers came with guns to kill us. They wanted to attack us. They wanted to frighten us. Tangum saw them first. He started firing at them. He hit one man who fell to the ground. We surrounded them and killed them.
The island peoples are sending an unmistakable warning. Enter our territory without permission, and you will die.
Where these islands are concerned, their indigenous inhabitants have clearly imposed a no-entry taboo. And because it is obviously of existential importance to them, they uphold it with bows and arrows and the threat of death.
But not even the Sentinelese remain undisturbed.
An American missionary has been killed while trying to contact...
November 2018 saw a fatality which caused a sensation. John Allen Chow, an American citizen, was killed by the Sentinelese after setting foot illegally on their island in the hope of missionizing them.
In the case of John Chow, I thought the Sentinelese were very decent people. I mean, the first time they saw him, they could have killed him outright, right? But they didn't kill him. In fact, they didn't even touch him. They asked a 10-year-old guy to shoot at his shoulder, or he did it himself without being instructed. But John Chow was shot at his shoulder by a 10-year-old. And that was a very big indication for him to move out of the land and leave them alone. But he didn't understand. He came back to the boat, he left his journal, and he went again into the Sentinel Island. So he was very stubborn.
Getting justice for this American's death could get very complicated.
Once again, everyone was talking about the allegedly deadliest people on Earth. There was even discussion on whether the Sentinelese should be charged with murder.
They are not hostile. They are behaving like any of you or any of us would behave if somebody intrudes in our house without our permission. Of course, we will be hostile. We will like to shove him out of the house. So that's what they're doing. That little island is their house.
But what happens when a natural disaster threatens to wipe out an entire people? On December the 26th, 2004, a powerful earthquake triggered off a tsunami in the Indian Ocean, which claimed hundreds of thousands of lives on the coasts of the Bay of Bengal.
This huge wave came. We ran to higher levels, but everything was flooded. It was terrifying. But none of us died. There were lots of dead fish, though. There were even dead fish in the trees.
Indian Coast Guards found clear traces of the tsunami all along the Andaman coastline. At first, there was no sign that the Sentinelese had survived, until suddenly, the fuselage of a helicopter was struck by an arrow, an unmistakable message. The example of the Jarawa shows that the radical rejection by the Sentinelese of contact with the outside world could well represent their sole chance of survival.
I used to tell my colleagues that I would like to be there to see a Jarawa being the governor of Andaman Nicobar Island.
Let us give them time. If they want to integrate with us, we will integrate them, but let them choose the time and the intensity of the contact.
What more can I say? If we go to the other world, we fall ill. Living here is more peaceful.